likewise between Camden and Hampstead in London. I don't know what the numbers are here, but I bet you would come up with something similar. It's your wealth, which is correlated with a multitude of other things, and diet, and smoking, and all those sorts of things, which is a major determinant of your health. Now, if you pick people who drink wine, they're probably going to be the more well-off classes, and or at least that would have been true a few years ago. When the ones who drink less would not be. So it's probably going to come out that the wine's good for you. It's not the wine. It's just the fact that they're rich. It's good for them. And it really is these epidemiological studies often come out of respectable university departments. But I don't think they should be published at all, actually, because no amount of discussion or reflection is going to tell you whether it's really a causal effect. This is the problem, you see. Red wine may be correlated with some particular aspect of good health, but that's not what matters. What matters is, if you change your red wine intake, will you change the outcome? And if it's not causal, then of course changing the red wine intake, if you're poor and you suddenly start drinking a whole stack of red wine, that's not going to make you die as if you were rich. It's just probably going to make you die even sooner because you've added drink to all your other problems. And this problem is continuously neglected, not only by health journalists who never seem to stress it, but also by the people who do the studies. And this is bad science. And it very often comes from university departments that have nothing to do with crackpot medicine, quite respectable epidemiologists. You always have to look for randomization. It's desperately important. People don't appreciate its importance.
You seem to be placing a lot of the blame for the popularity of homeopathy and herbal remedies with the people, the practitioners on that side. I wonder whether you think that maybe Western medicine might have to ask itself some questions about why people are turning away from things that work to less proven remedies.
Of course, yes. I mean, I think I said what I intended to anyway. I usually do. That the one major reason is that there are so many things that Western medicine can't cure. It's natural to concentrate on sort of major important advances, antibiotics, penicillin, anesthetics. I mean, nobody could deny that they're enormous boon that's come out of conventional science. But if you've got backache or a common cold, forget it. You know, they're enormously common, enormously disabling in some cases, but you can do nothing for them. Of course, people who are suffering from these things will become desperate and will go to quacks. And if they feel better having shelled out a lot of money for something useless, it cheers them up, I suppose. No great harm is done as long as it's not actually toxic, which isn't always the case. Or it doesn't divert them from getting such treatment as might be available. I'm not proposing to ban herbalism or homeopathy, but I just don't want to have to pay for it as a taxpayer, that's all. But certainly it's the deficiencies of medicine. They're not deficiencies for anybody's fault, it's just that it's very complicated. And scientific medicine is really quite a recent phenomenon. Physics became scientific hundreds of years ago. Medicine became scientific somewhere around 1950. I mean, the most clear borderline, I exaggerate slightly. It's enormously complicated, and we haven't been trying that long, so there's all sorts of things you can't do. And the trouble is, the quacks prey on that. They target groups of this sort. They target parents of autistic children mercilessly with crackpot treatment, trying to extract money from them. And that is very, very unpleasant, I think.
Has medicine as practiced by your local GP been influenced by homeopathy and corporate funding, and if so, to what extent?
Well, a bit difficult to generalize about GPs, especially since I'm not one. I doubt if it's been vastly influenced by alternative medicine, except insofar as when these things became intellectually respectable almost to believe things that weren't true, perhaps they were more inclined to refer people to homeopaths. But I'm sure it's undoubtedly true that some doctors, both the GPs and in hospitals, are influenced by corporate funding. It's become quite a scandal. People get taken to phony conferences in holiday resorts and given lavish meals by drug companies. There are things called medical education companies, which are supposed to be providing continuing medical education for doctors, which are simply advertising vehicles. And this is not good, and it does distort prescribing practices to some extent, but quantitatively I have no idea how much. I mean, I know we have some people in the audience who are practicing clinicians. I don't know if they would like to comment on that.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks. I really enjoyed the talk, just curious that I guess where your line of quackery is drawn, because using homeopathy as an introduction it's obviously, from a chemical viewpoint, from a biomedical viewpoint, it's easy to tear it up very very quickly. But just wondering, for some of the herbal remedies and some of the, I guess, orthomolecular, using high-dose vitamin therapy and other things, that might fit within that realm of quackery. I guess, like, where do you draw the line? Because one other thing, you made the comment that there's no good randomized controlled trials for herbal medicines, and I would have to disagree. I think there are quite that evidence is growing, and there certainly is some of that.
There are some trials, but if you can point to many positive ones, then I would be surprised. No, it's not that there are no trials, but there are relatively few good trials. It's quite expensive and difficult to do a good one. And there was a recent summary, I think, for individualized herbal treatment. They looked at 3,000 or so trials, or was it 1,000? Anyway, there was 3 that they reckoned were good quality. And of those 3, 2 were negative and 1 was ambiguous. And this is the sort of level of evidence there is for herbal medicines. It's not completely absent, but there's not anything like what you need to justify the taxpayer paying for it. If they produce the evidence, they will. It's very easy to draw the line, though. The line is between medicines that work and medicines that don't work. It doesn't matter a damn whether they're called alternative or regular or who makes them. The only line that matters is between things that work and things that don't work. And by that criterion, alternative medicine, almost by definition, means all those things that don't work. Because if they did work, they wouldn't be alternative anymore. They'd just be part of medicine, wouldn't they? I mean, there is a sort of conspiracy theory that which is quite widespread among Alties, and maybe that the doctors are trying to hide something from you. They know what the cure is, but they're trying to hide it from you. Even by books, all the things the doctors won't tell you. This is very curious. Can you imagine anyone behaving in that way? It's a sort of extreme form of conspiracy theory, I suppose. But of course, if you can produce a really top-rate clinical trial repeated in several places that shows Arnica 30X reduces your time for a bruise to heal, then Arnica 30X should be part of the national formula and paid for by the health service. It would no longer be alternative, it would just be medicine.
How come more academics or doctors don't speak out against quack and alternative treatments? Why is it only a select few people like yourself or Dr. Stephen Avella and a couple other bloggers in ORAC? They're the only ones who seem to be speaking out against it.
I think more and more do as people discover the power of the web. It was very difficult a few years ago to speak out. You had to get an article into a newspaper or something. Newspapers, on the whole, like celebrities, and most academics aren't celebrities. It was quite hard to get anything published along these lines. But now it's dead easy. You can sit in front of the television and post it and the world can see it. And this actually, much to my surprise, really has influence. It doesn't cost any money either. Pay some kind person who was a sympathizer gave me the web server space for nothing, and I could pay $8.99 for the domain name. That's what it would cost me. But it costs a lot of time and an unpleasant amount of time spent reading really crappy science. So one answer is time. Most young people in science are incredibly busy trying to keep up with the targets set for them by HR, and they can't afford to spend the time that I now can. Another reason is fear. People are frightened that if they speak out, it may affect their promotion in some way. I think that is actually quite wrong. People are over-fearful. that's not the reason either, because you can blog anonymously. It carries a little less weight perhaps, but it's still listened to. Look at Halford Watch. It had about a well-known crackpot English nutritionist. That was a good example of blogging, actually. The page on Halford Watch had, no, it was a different one, Quackometer, another very young man whom I know. I won't tell you his real name, but he's very well known, actually. Quackometer had a lovely example about this malarial scam. It's called The Gentle Art of Homeopathic Killing. And it so annoyed the Society of Homeopaths that they sent a legal threat, not an actual suit, but a threat to his internet service provider, not to him. And the internet service provider, being chicken, pulled the page off. And there was Andy, you've got Andy Lewis, not a secret. Of course, had a copy of the page, which he emailed to all his friends. And within 2 days, that page had been reproduced in at least 60 different websites around the world. And if you did a Google search for Society of Homeopaths, 9 of the first 10 results on the first page of Google pointed to the banned page. The wonderful thing about the web is it's very difficult to keep secrets. And on the whole, I think this is a very good thing for, well, for democracy as a whole, actually. So it's quite a big thing. So I think as more people realize that it actually doesn't require a lot of expertise, it does require a little time to write blogs, they'll do it. And I suspect that's what will play a large role in turning things around, if indeed they do turn around, that I think they might do. I just encourage everyone to start a blog. Ben Goldacre, who I've skipped over, but has the #1 medical blog in the world at badscience.net, 15,000 hits a day, very popular in England, read all over the world. He is actually, he's a full-time NHS junior doctor. He's about 32, looks about 20, and manages to write his blog on his BlackBerry while riding his bike around London, apparently. Quite a remarkable man. And got the Royal Statistical Society Award for Scientific Journalism. Had a huge influence on the quality of scientific journalism by criticising bad journalism. And where did this start? He was actually thinking of setting up a stand at the British Association for Advancement of Science fair, where lots of kids go there, giving people 5-minute lessons on how to setting up their own blog. Set one up for them. Said, okay, go and write things. And I'd advise that. It's a complete change from 5 years ago, but I find it bloody well works, and it's fun too. And you can be anonymous if you're already scared that you're going to get fired. In some jobs you would have to. In universities you shouldn't have to, but some people prefer to anyway.
I was wondering, you gave a big number of examples of very significant universities that have departments dedicated to alternative medicine. But how significant are these departments? I mean, how many people actually go and have degrees from these departments, and how much attention do they get?
I think on the whole, they're not actually degree-giving things. I only made that list quite recently. I had to tailor my talk for a North American audience. The original examples were all UK ones. I think these are hospital departments more than teaching departments. So they're treating a lot of patients. But I don't think, by and large, they're giving degrees. I'm really interested to get information on this, and before I can get it off the web, it's just time, question of time. So in one way, it's better than England if they're not actually teaching these things in universities. But they certainly seem to be spreading them, and they're certainly treating patients, and they're certainly spreading misleading information on university websites. So it's bad. I think it'd be bad in a slightly different way from in the UK. But the university presidents are just as culpable. It's their university who's spreading quackery, and they should be fired for it. That's my view, at least. You should look as if you disagree.
I know.
But I'm not sure to the extent of what they do teaching. I think largely the teaching, does anyone here know? I think the teaching is probably done in non-university colleges as a rule. If you can call it teaching, just when you're talking simple mumbo-jumbo. Okay? That's what all I can say about that one.
So this is a question about, you talk about the need for randomized controlled trials of these different vitamin supplements, whatever. And the problem that I see with that is that I think it's very expensive to run proper controlled trials.
It is.
And the problem with these things is that there's no intellectual property. Like, who's going to pay millions and millions of dollars to run this trial when anybody else can just go and sell that same supplement without having to invest the cost? Like, I wonder if you have any ideas for how, like, should the public be paying to test these things? Or?
Well, this is what homeopaths always say, but I should have thought it was in the interest of the big homeopathic companies like Boiron and Weleda, which make vast, vast profits. I should have thought it was in their interest to have a good clinical trial which showed their stuff worked. Then they surely make even faster profits. It's true that they couldn't patent it and everybody else could produce the same homeopathic thing, but it's not going to do them any harm, is it?
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, but they've got buckets of money. Turnover was 300,000. I can't remember. I've got somewhere on my website. It's got Boiron's turnover. It's huge because they have zero costs of production, zero costs of research. Selling litre bottles of water for more than the price of gasoline is pretty profitable. But selling 30 ml bottles of water for £1,000 a litre, that's printing money. Of course, they're very wealthy. And it seems to me that the very fact that they don't use any of that wealth to conduct proper trials is a very strong indication that they know deep down that they're going to fail as they do, and they'd be out of business. If they had any confidence at all that their product worked, they would do the trials, patents or no patents. It should only be to their advantage to do it. It would stop people like us abusing them for a start. They become respectable. Why don't they do them if they know damn well it's going to fail? So they're just dishonest.
Sorry. Do you think there's a connection between the university presidents and their quackademics and the public turning away from science?
I doubt if university presidents are the sort who turn away from science. No,
Well,
I think it's simpler than
not
that.
the university
They get paid
presidents.
per student. They get paid for bums on seats, and the more students they can get in, the better, and they don't really care if they're being taught witchcraft or voodoo or homeopathy. Make the distinction between those is quite subtle, of course. But I think it's pure financial greed, pure Reaganomics, Thatcheromics. The blame is all Reagan. We have a large share of the blame in this matter in the UK.
I just have a quick question for you. So you said universities will regain sort of their integrity if they have scientists running the university rather than people with MBAs or whatnot, or these business degrees. But aren't most of the science conducted requiring money that are offered by granting agencies, such as the Canadian government through something like CIHR or NSERC? So how does having scientists running the universities have some sort of dominance or control over who gets those grants?
No, I didn't say scientists running the university. I said scientists running scientists running science. Of course, you have to have administrators to handle financial matters and student enrollment, all of these things. We've always had them, of course. And they were always regarded as service departments, and they were there to help the people who do the teaching and research, I presume. It hasn't actually changed that the functions of the university are to do teaching and research, both. And the people who do it are therefore presumably the most, in that sense, the most important people in the university. They obviously need administrative help. The problem comes when you don't have a personnel department who helps you keep the payroll in line and make sure the pensions get paid, but an HR manager who tells you what sort of science you should be doing and how to employ a postdoc, which is what they do now. This is actually the transition from a personnel department to a human resources department is actually, if you look on HR websites, I came across one the other day, that was an explicit move to move their role from being an advocate for the employee to being a member of the senior management. This is what it said on the HR side, because of course it's much more important to be a member of the senior management. So it's a bit of self-aggrandizement among those administrators, even the change of name. And it was a perfectly intentional one. That was the interesting thing. I haven't really realized that. That's what it just happened by accident. So now, for instance, I sent that stuff about citations to our promotions committee which I think I can safely do, because I'm in line for promotions now. Because I thought they should know about these things. You find that people, it isn't actually common knowledge that impact factors are not correlated with citations, for example. And it should be by people who are doing promotion. And because they said you can give these measures in your promotion forms, I sent it to members of the promotion committee saying, if you don't know about this, I think you'll find it interesting, or something like that. And then I got a letter from our HR Führerin, as I call her on the way, and asking me to desist from lobbying the promotions committee. Lobbying. So I sent a quick one back saying I wasn't aware that it was the role of the personnel manager to tell which other academic they're allowed to talk to. I think you're exceeding your remit and you can reply to that. But this is the sort of thing that happens. And you know, to a young person, that can be very intimidating. It intimidated me very much. I'm not worrying. This lady also sits on teaching committees and tells the teaching committee what they... She's a bloody personnel manager, I've got to say. And she's telling what degrees should be like. This seems to be management exceeding its proper role. It has got a proper role. We need good administrators, a minimum number of them for reasons of economy. We've had 3, in UCL, just recently, we've had 3 new layers of administration imposed on the Faculty of Life Sciences. I discovered only yesterday about yet another administrator. There was somebody called a neuroscience data analyst, so I was going to send him one of my experiments to analyze, but it turned out he wasn't for that, he was just counting beans.
Okay, so we've talked about chiropractics and homeopathy, obviously, but is there any field, because these are increasingly being covered by insurance companies in Canada, so there's RMT or massage therapy, reflexology, acupuncture, and hypnosis. Is there sufficient scientific basis for any of these practices?
Acupuncture is an interesting one. There's no doubt that sticking meat, and you mentioned 2 other things which are interesting, massage and reflexology. I've seen a survey in which terminal cancer patients said that they felt happier when someone came and massaged their feet. Now, I mean, if I'm lucky enough to have terminal cancer, God, they keep away from me, that's all, I don't my feet tickle. But some people like it, and that's okay, they should have it. There's nothing wrong with massage. Reflexology is almost certainly just foot massage, accompanied by the most unutterable crap about how your big toe is connected to your kidney and stuff. You know, which it just isn't. And then it will no doubt produce the same placebo effect. There's nothing wrong with honest placebo effects. And you have to ask then, how much dishonesty are you willing to tolerate in order to increase the placebo effect? It may be if you tell the patient that it's very good when I wiggle your big toe because it's connected to your kidney and it will cure your kidney cancer. That might produce a better placebo effect than saying I'm just massaging your feet and I hope it feels nice. But it seems to me that goes beyond the limit of what's acceptable to get a good placebo effect. And there's no reason to think it's much better anyway as a placebo effect. So there's nothing wrong with placebo effect, but there's a lot wrong with dishonesty. And there's actually a real dilemma there. How much dishonesty will you accept to get that effect? I've got a list on the DC Science on one of the pages, the dilemmas of alternative medicine, and it is a real dilemma. So sure, have foot masseurs, but don't call them reflexologists. And don't insist that they have a certificate in reflexology, as though that told you anything.
Just a really quick question from an educator. If some of us might not be brave enough to step up to the plate and blog or debunk crap, are there ways that less brave of us among educators or teachers can encourage our students to know the smell of BS? I mean, what ways could we be doing if we're not brave enough to be one of the outspoken so-called persons like yourself? How can we be teaching our students to know what bullshit smells like? It's
quite interesting. I was appalled when I saw that homeopathy had been introduced in the official school exams. Well, it wasn't so much homeopathy. It was introduced under the disguise of critical thinking. But I regarded that as pretty dangerous because it rather depends on the teacher, and since probably there's a substantial fraction of teachers who, who are true believers, it could easily be abused. But in fact, the Association of Science Teachers wrote to me and a bunch of other people saying, can you give us some advice to set the standard?